those were people at a release and reclaim retreat. I do this once in a while, having people for a full 3-day weekend, and then we can work together on some activities and processes that are more than just intellectual, because it goes so deep. It goes so deep. It's not just an intellectual process. And it helps to read a lot of books and learn about different ways of thinking. But then it also has to do with the way that you've been programmed and indoctrinated at a deep level from when you were a small child, before your brain was really fully developed. And that's why it's very hard to change some of those feelings. And there can be this enormous disconnect between what you know up here and what you feel down here. And that's why the healing is sometimes difficult and can take a long time. So somebody who's like 65 years old can call me up and say, I haven't believed this for decades, and yet I have nightmares where I can't sleep, and I wake up thinking that I'm sweating and thinking that I've gone to hell. Okay? Because that's called trauma. That's called phobia indoctrination. Phobia is when you have a fear that's irrational, and you're reacting on that basis, and it has nothing to do with what you think rationally, because you incurred that fear in a way at a time when it had this emotional impact, and it has to do with your brain. Your brain has different parts. Your emotional brain is very old. It's in the back of your head. It's lodged in. Your old brain is your amygdala. That's where your emotions are. It's where your fight or flight feelings come from. And when you're told when you're a tiny child about hell, about the rapture, and people say, oh well, you're not talking about hell as fire and brimstone anymore. It's separation from God, and that's because you're choosing not to be with God. God loves you, and you're choosing not to have a relationship with God. I'm sorry, that's still the worst kind of terror, because that's abandonment. Abandonment, as any psychologist can tell you, is the worst fear we have. It's the worst terror that humans have. Why? Because humans don't live. They don't survive after they're born the way other animals do. It takes us a couple of years to become able to take care of ourselves, to even survive. So the idea of being abandoned is absolutely terrifying. So left behind, are you kidding? The whole rapture thing, same thing. So, and then the other thing they do to children, we, I still have to get out of this, is the guilt induction. You have this bloody Christ, and then you tell a child that it's because of their sin, and you ask them if they've ever done anything wrong, if they've ever stolen something, told a lie, not been absolutely true, of course. And then here's this person suffering, and you prey on a child's best instincts, a child's sympathy for somebody's pain. I just find that so unbelievably vile. And then that child will then feel so terrible, and then you want this child to be responsible. The clients that I have will remember, most of them, if they became Christian in childhood, will say more often than not that it was around 5 years old. Do any of you here remember becoming saved at around 5? That is no accident at all. That's the cognitively developmental time when you can process enough information to understand cause and effect, to understand another person's point of view, and to be able enough, that is, not sufficiently enough to understand it in a mature way, but to understand it enough to feel guilty and sorry and to fall for it at age 5. That's when it happened to me. I was a mess. I broke down in tears. I was listening to a guest preacher in our church, and I just fell apart sobbing about Jesus' pain, Jesus' death. I could visualize it. Kids at that age can do that. And my mother had to take me out, and my family was just really happy about that. Because I got it. I was finally sorry for all of my sins, all of my little girl 5-year-old sins. I hope you all are sorry for what you did at age 5. Made somebody have to die for you. Anyway, okay, so you have all the guilt, and then you have all the fear, of course, hellfire. You're going to be sorry, or you will die and suffer forever. That's great. This is why people call it child abuse, which of course it is. And then you add to that physical abuse that people go through all the time in families that have this framework, because it's a hierarchical, authoritarian framework, right? Where God is at the top, and then you come down to church leaders, to then the man is the head of the house, and it's all a power structure. So in order to enforce the rules, and using physical punishment is okay. What's okay in terms of enforcing things is absolutely draconian. So there's plenty of history of physical abuse and sexual abuse, because sex is totally perverted too. So you have all that abuse. And then, guess what the definition of terrorism is? What is terrorism? Terrorism, this is a dictionary definition. Terrorism is the use of fear and violence to control. It's not just violence, it's also fear of violence. So guess what? Teaching a child, people, this is rather amazing, but it's totally logical if you think about it. People that brainwash children into fearing for their salvation and feeling guilty and suffering for the rest of their lives with all of these traumas are terrorists. And we're suffering, everybody suffers for that. Our whole nation suffers because of that.